Mirrors. You see them and use them every single day, from checking one's appearance, to driving cars, to observing the cosmos. To you, they're nothing but a simple, everyday tool. But to me, my youth and a vast majority of my teenage years were spent trying to avoid them. As a child, my psyche was consumed by the illogical fear that I may look into a mirror and see something behind me. I was afraid that I'd see an intruder, a shadow creature, a monster, any manner of frightening things that could appear which shouldn't be there and hadn't been before I looked. Yet, whenever I passed by a mirror, I always found my gaze locked upon the glistening surface, searching the entirety of the image shown in the reflection until I had completely escaped its reach. During my teenage years, the fear evolved into also being afraid of my reflection. I was terrified by the thought of looking at myself in the mirror only to be met with an image that wasn't my own, a reflection that was altered or perhaps even altogether different, in a place where my own should be. My psychologist, Dr. Marion Cutts, once explained to me her theory that this particular phobia could stem from inner turmoil caused by my actions being drastically different from how I wished to be. In exchanges or confrontations where I should be able to remain calm and reasonable, I expressed myself with aggression and outbursts. That it may somehow be intertwined with my initial fear of seeing monsters in a mirror. In other words, I was afraid of seeing my own perceived, true self staring back at me. Dr. Cutts did a fantastic job of helping me work through my trauma, and in doing so, was able to help me manage my phobia and outbursts. She had guided me to the point of being more comfortable with mirrors, at least when it was necessary to utilize them. But all of that changed when I agreed to store my friend Beth's heirloom standing mirror in my apartment.
A little to the left, Carlos. We've almost got it.
Beth called to me from the narrow hallway. Okay, one sec. I responded carefully, repositioning my hands and feet.
Good. Now just lift a bit and step backward. You're good. Keep going.
This should be fine, I replied. Let's sit her up.
All right. Easy now. Easy. One leg, then the other.
Each leg met the dingy beige carpet with a soft, yet sturdy thud. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel a little uneasy about having to share a bedroom with my arch nemesis.
Phew, didn't know if we were going to make it.
Beth said with a sigh of relief, wiping the sweat from her brow.
Let's take a look and make sure we didn't damage it.
I started in protest, but before I could finish, she had ripped the old sheet away. There it was, in all of its glory, a wide, oval-shaped mirror, set into a beautifully carved cherry wood frame that had been well maintained for over a century. The wood was adorned with reliefs of flowers and vines reaching up from the base and feet to the top. Aside from a few scuffs on the wood here and there and a small crack across the top of the glass, it was still astonishingly beautiful, nearly flawless.
Well now, ain't she a beaut?
Beth asked in the best attempt at a southern accent she could muster, mimicking someone we both knew, then proceeded to fog up a section of the mirror with her breath and polish it with a corner of the sheet. I hesitated, still standing off to the side. Well, yeah, I guess it is, considering what it is.
I know how uncomfortable this must be for you, and I'm sorry.
She replied, turning to face me.
You have no idea how much I appreciate it.
Well, it's not like you had much of a choice, right? And it's not permanent, so keeping that in mind should help a lot.
True, and I don't have anyone else that I trust with it. It's been in my family for quite a while, even though it rarely saw the light of day. It's just until I save up enough to move.
He reassured me. I know, but your mother was more of a mom to me than my own ever was, and I know how much she loved this old mirror, so maybe that will help as well.
She really did, even though she shared your disdain for looking into it. Rest her soul. Are you sure you're all right keeping it in your bedroom?
She asked. I don't have anywhere else to put it in this pocket-sized apartment, so it will have to be. I answered back, feigning a chuckle.
If you say so.
She said with a smile, then turned toward the mirror. She stood there for a moment, gazing upon her reflection, then proceeded to brush her long, jet-black hair back into place with her fingers, and poked at the bags under her eyes. Losing her mother suddenly due to a massive stroke took its toll on her, and it was plain to see.
I'm heading home.
Okay, Beth. Text me when you make it there. After walking Beth to my front door, I promptly shut and locked it behind her before I turned my back toward it and leaned on it. Did I really just agree to this? I asked myself, then cupped my face in my hands and slid down the dented metal door onto the scuffed linoleum floor below. I slid my hands down my face, then draped them limply over my knees. I stared blankly into space for some time, pondering over how I was going to handle this situation. Thanks to Dr. Kutz, I was able to comfortably utilize mirrors to some extent, such as the one in my bathroom used for cosmetic reasons, but that mirror is in an enclosed space that would be someone with claustrophobia's worst nightmare. There were only a few feet between it and the wall, so, in my mind, there was no room for something to appear behind me, and I only ever glanced at it for a few seconds at a time in an attempt to prevent my reflection from being potentially warped. But, in my bedroom, with all of that space in front of it, the thought alone made me shudder. Eventually, I was able to pull myself together and made my way to my bedroom. I stood in the doorway for a moment, eyes locked onto the side of the mirror, which was facing toward my bed. "You're lucky I love you and your mother, Beth," I said to myself. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I walked over to my bed, and I began to tremble as I sat down, facing the mirror with my eyes locked onto the carpet. "Okay, you can do this. You can do this. Remember what Marion said. It's just glass." I spoke aloud, repeating, "It's just glass. It's just glass," until I was able to wrestle my eyes away from the carpet and onto the beautifully carved base. "It's just glass. It's just glass." My eyes finally met the surface, and I instantly began searching the reflection of the room behind me for anything abnormal, eventually meeting my own eyes. A strange feeling came over me, and my body became so tense that I couldn't move. I didn't know if it was fear or something else entirely, but I felt utterly paralyzed. No, 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 no. I screamed in my head, for my lips wouldn't respond. This cannot be happening. What if something crawls up from the other side of my bed and I can't move? I stared at my reflection for what felt like an eternity, unwavering, feeling as if I was being forced. I then noticed that the corners of my mouth in the reflection appeared to be turned slightly upwards, almost like a smirk, but I wasn't smiling. There is no way that I would ever be while looking into a mirror, especially in this situation. The sight made my heart beat out of my chest and my body erupted into a cold sweat. It was one of my greatest fears come to life. The corners of my mouth in the reflection tilted up further. My phone vibrated inside my pocket, which somehow managed to break me free of the trance. Upon regaining control of my body, I pulled my phone out of my pocket, woke up the screen, and checked the alert. It was Beth, letting me know that she had made it home safely, as well as asking how I was doing with the mirror. I lied, telling her that I was doing all right, and placed my phone on the nightstand. I then stood up, yanked the old sheet up from the floor, and threw it over the mirror. "Okay, that'll be enough of that," I said to it, laughing uncomfortably at the ridiculousness of the situation. "Time to get some sleep." I awoke in the middle of the night, facing toward my bedroom window, away from the mirror. The fog of drowsiness was soon replaced by a feeling of uneasiness upon realizing that the mirror stood behind me. I wanted to roll over and look at my phone to check the time and see if I had received any messages. I wasn't able to bring myself around to it until I remembered that I'd covered the mirror with the old sheet. Somewhat comforted by the thought of not having to face my reflection, I closed my eyes and began to slowly turn myself over. Upon opening my eyes, I was met with my own in the reflection of the mirror. My body turned to stone and my blood ran cold. The sheet had slipped, fallen away just enough so that I could see my face in the mirror. My reflection was smiling. There was no emotion anywhere in its expression. The eyes were cold and blank like the rest of the face. My chest began to tighten, my breathing became light and shallow, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't force my body to respond. Time seemed to come to a standstill while I was locked into this hellish staring contest without any change to the reflection other than the smile. Until it began to move. My vision started to narrow as I watched the reflection of my head raise from the pillow. It never went behind the blanket as one would expect from the typical motion of sitting up in bed. It stayed locked onto me, staring into my eyes as the head ascended. the body presumably being brought forward toward the headboard until it became visible. Judging from what I could tell, the body moved in an unsettling and unnatural way until my reflection was sitting upright on the pillow. As it sat, it kept its eyes locked onto mine, still smiling that cold, lifeless smile. After a while, its body slowly lurched forward. The head, still fixated on me, was bent back in such a way that witnessing it made my neck hurt. It then slowly pulled itself into a standing position and began to make its way toward the glass. Its movements seemed labored, uncoordinated, almost as if it didn't know how to control its own body. Upon reaching the glass, the shambling figure pressed its hands against it, puffing as if it were exhausted. Then, its left hand came through the glass. My heart felt like it was going to explode as I watched its hand pass through the glass with little resistance, as if it were no more than a layer of tissue paper, easily breached. Its hand grabbed onto the sheet and pulled it the rest of the way off, sending it into a pile on the floor. My reflection then repositioned itself toward the middle and pressed its face into the glass until it eventually passed through. Its entire body then tumbled behind limply, landing in the space between my bed and the mirror, which was just out of sight. My eyes became free, so I searched around trying to see into the space and listened in terror, fully expecting it to spring forth from the space and be face to face with me. For the longest time, there was utter silence, stillness. And then I felt a tug on my comforter. The comforter slowly trailed away from me toward the floor, and I immediately realized what was happening. It was pulling the blanket off of me. Not long after, a hand emerged from the darkness. It reached up limply, slowly revealing more of the appendage. It appeared to be a normal human arm on the outside, but it did not bend or flex at the finger joints, wrists, or elbow. No, it moved more like a tentacle, one solid piece with no joints or bones. It came down upon the outside of my thigh with a sharp smack and began tightening its grip. It pulled itself upward toward me, the cold, smiling face slowly coming into view, followed by the other arm, which found firm grip on my hip. The imposter kept pulling itself up until it was able to climb onto my bed, then threw its leg over me and climbed onto my side, straddling me. It was immensely heavy, weighing at least 3 times more than me. I couldn't have moved even if I were able to. I felt its hand creep up my spine, slowly making its way to my shoulder. All of a sudden, it jerked me onto my back, and I was now forced to look at those cold eyes and lifeless smile. It looked exactly like me in every way, except it appeared to be a mirrored image come to life. It was my reflection, after all. I still couldn't move, and I began to hyperventilate as it grabbed my face, turning my head from side to side as if it were studying me. It then released my face, placed its hands on the mattress on each side of my head, and lowered its face until it was less than an inch away from my own. Sniff, sniff. It pulled away, still staring into my eyes as its smile widened and revealed its teeth. My body began to tremble in anticipation of its next move. Its eyes rolled upward as its head began to fall back between its shoulders. The movement was followed by the sound of a labored, choked inhalation that was reminiscent of a death rattle. The torso and head began to straighten into an upright position as it pulled in more air, repositioning until its gaze was again fixed upon my own, but the smile was gone. It sat perfectly still, totally silent for a while, until all of a sudden its hand gripped my chin and pulled my mouth open so far that I thought it was going to rip my lower jaw clean off. The smile re-emerged for a split second before it opened its mouth and began to spew a putrid substance all over my face. I tried to close my eyes and mouth. I tried to pull away, but it was useless. I was frozen in place. It filled my mouth, my nose, my eyes. My face was completely covered in a pile of viscous goop. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe, and I couldn't even cough to try to clear my air passages. I thought for sure that this was the end, that I would choke to death upon whatever repulsive mess it had vomited all over my face. I awoke facing the window, the soft, golden rays of morning sun now filling my room. I shot up in bed, turning myself immediately around to look at the mirror. It was covered with the old sheet, exactly as I had left it before going to sleep. I ran my hands over my face and examined the bed in a panic. There was no evidence whatsoever of what I had experienced last night. I breathed a sigh of relief before making my way to the edge of the bed. It was just a dream. My head was killing me and I felt a bit nauseous, so I decided to go see what medicine I had that would help. I picked up my phone off of the nightstand and slipped it in the pocket of my pajama pants before making my way into the kitchen. I had just finished gulping down a few pills that I found in the kitchen, as well as my daily medicine when I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. It was Beth. The text read,
Good morning. How did you sleep? Did having the mirror keep you awake?
I replied, saying that I slept fine. There was no need to worry her, and I knew that telling the truth about my nightmare would just make her feel even worse about the situation. The medicine didn't help much, but I had to leave for work soon, so there was no time to worry about it. On my way out the door, my neighbor, Dave, stopped me for a chat. I didn't know him very well, and he made me uneasy for some reason, even though he was always friendly, albeit a tad shy and backward. Maybe it was his smell or his scraggly, unkempt appearance. It was also very off-putting that his accent didn't match his persona at all. Hey, how's it going, Carlos? It goes, heading to work. What's up? Not much. He crinkled his nose and pushed his pop bottle glasses back into place. I, saw that you and Beth. He smirked a little, looking away nervously. We're moving something into your apartment yesterday. I'd have offered some help, but I probably would have just gotten in the way. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate the sentiment, but hey, I gotta run. I'll catch you later or something. Alright, you take it easy, bud. Work was as tedious as always, other than having to struggle through each agonizing call with unruly, agitated customers. The only change to the routine was the way that I felt. The migraine and nausea persisted through the day, though steadily decreasing in severity, and had almost completely faded by the end of my shift. I texted Beth on my walk home to ask if she would like to meet up for dinner.
I have plans for tonight. Sorry. I'll see you soon.
Great. Another boring Friday night to myself. I sulked, but simply replied with, Okay, see you soon. I entered my apartment building and dashed up the concrete stairs, stopping short before turning the corner to the hallway to check and see if Dave was out and about. The coast was clear, so I rounded the corner and made my way toward the door as silently as possible. I always felt awful about intentionally avoiding Dave since he was so friendly, but as I said before, he made me feel uneasy. I took some more medicine, microwaved the frozen meal, and spent the rest of the evening flipping through the same old streaming apps on my TV until I felt tired enough to head to bed. I stood up and headed towards my bedroom, where the mirror was. I stopped just outside the door, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath, hoping that it would still be covered before turning the knob. I opened the door just enough so that I could peek through the crack and get a good look. The mirror was still completely covered with the old sheet. My entire body relaxed at the sight, as if a few tons of tension had been removed all at once. Although the fact the mirror was still in my bedroom made me uneasy, I removed the dirt, changed into pajama pants, and laid down, eager and ready for sleep. I awoke in the middle of the night to what sounded like my bedroom door closing, and the feeling that there was presence in my apartment. I was again facing the window, too terrified to move, with my ears trained and listening for any little sound, but there was nothing. I didn't hear any footsteps leading away from my bedroom, nor the sound of my front door opening and closing. Deep down, I knew that I shouldn't turn around and look, that I should just force myself to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. I had the unshakable feeling that I was being watched, and had to reassure myself that I was safe before attempting to go back to sleep. So I rolled over and immediately regretted it. My reflection was staring back at me. Much to my dismay, the mirror had somehow become uncovered while I was asleep. The same feeling of paralysis once again came over me, and my reflection wore that same cold, lifeless smile on its face. My heart sunk into a bottomless pit of dread within me as I watched it get up out of bed and begin lumbering toward the glass. Again, it came through with little effort, only this time it was able to keep its balance. It didn't come over to the bed, it just stood there and stared at me for a while as my body quaked at the sight, almost as if it was savoring the moment. It then turned its eerie, smiling face towards my bedroom door, leaned its head forward and began moving towards it. The arms swung limply, and the legs seemed to struggle to support the weight, and all of the limbs had the same boneless, tentacle-like movement as they trailed behind. It stopped just short of the door, and his torso swayed around counterclockwise once before coming to rest, almost as if it were trying to regain its balance like a drunken sailor. It teetered over so slightly a few more times before yanking open the door and disappearing into the darkness. It had left me alone to stare at the mirror, which now only showed an empty bed in place of where my reflection should be. My body relaxed just a little after having watched it exit the room, but it did nothing to alleviate the fear. What was it doing, and what would happen if it came back? I tried to steady my breathing and listen intently for any sounds finding their way back to me. All was deathly silent for some time. The last thing that I had managed to hear was its feet meeting the linoleum in the kitchen. What the hell was that? I thought to myself. And then the realization finally hit me. It was going through my kitchen drawers. What was it looking for? I braced myself, waiting for another deafening slam to shatter the stillness. But instead, I heard what sounded like it rummaging through a drawer. Then I heard a gravelly, ominous release of breath that almost gave me the impression that something it had found made it very happy, followed by the sound of metal dragging across metal. It was taking something out. Silence. Waiting for a sound, any noise at all, drove me to my wit's end. I wanted to scream, to get up and run, but my body was still frozen in place. The only thing that I could move was my eyes. I wished to wake up from this nightmare, for it to end one way or another, and didn't care how. When suddenly I heard shambling footsteps approaching my room. I trained my eyes toward the doorway as far as I could manage, awaiting my doppelganger. It finally emerged, slowly stepping into the silver glow of the moonlight, and made its way over to me, stopping right in front of my legs. I still couldn't see what it had taken from the drawer, and my mind raced nervously, pondering what it could be. My already paralyzed body tensed even more and erupted into a cold sweat. I felt as if my temperature had soared to 200 degrees. It slowly raised its left appendage and grabbed my comforter, yanking it down from the floor with great force. It placed its hand upon my hip, then proceeded to roll me onto my back and clumsily climb on top of me as it had done before. It sat nearly upright upon my lower abdomen, straddling me, staring into my soul with those cold, lifeless eyes and a motionless smile. Its immense weight made it nearly impossible for me to breathe. The right arm was tucked behind its back, hiding its newfound toy from my sight. It sat upon me and stared into my eyes for what felt like millennia, gently swaying back and forth ever so slightly until it eventually grabbed onto my jaw as it had done before and began to take the unknown object from behind its back, raising it high above its head. It was a knife, my favorite kitchen knife, the largest and sharpest in the set. It was holding it at the perfect angle for the pale light to fully illuminate the blade, reflecting into my eyes. It moved its left hand down, opening my mouth as far as it could, and then it was still as a statue. The realization of what was about to happen made my eyes start to well up to the point that I was barely able to see, and I couldn't blink to clear them. I was nowhere near ready, yet here I was staring death in the face, quite literally. "If you're going to do it, then just do it and get it over with. End this, please," I begged in my mind, almost as if it had somehow heard me. The smile widened, and it swiftly brought the knife down with all of its might into its own solar plexus. I couldn't believe my eyes. Why did it stab itself? It didn't even flinch one bit. Its expression did not change, but it began to choke profusely. It removed the blade, spilling a bit of thick, dark blood onto my chest, which then seemed to creep its way toward my head. A putrid stench began to permeate the air, turning my stomach. It raised the blade once more, bringing it down into its heart, and began twisting the blade. Its dead eyes widened, and it began trying to cackle through the choking and gurgling before again removing the knife, subsequently spilling even more of its foul blood upon me. I became nauseous beyond measure, and the urge to vomit was overwhelming, but nothing ever came. I probably would have aspirated anyway if it had. The imposter then held the knife out to the side, maneuvering its hand and fingers in a grotesque, inhumane way until the knife was eventually flipped the opposite way before bringing it to its neck. It plunged the blade several inches into my left side, then proceeded to drag it along to the other, all the while still trying to cackle, its eyes locked upon mine. Blood began to ooze from the deep gash straight down onto my body. It threw its head back, widening the wound and causing more and more blood to spew, which was only exacerbated with each attempt at laughter. I looked down in horror as the blood collected together, continuing to creep towards my gaping mouth. My doppelganger then raised its left hand and began slicing across through its fingers bit by bit, working its way downward. There were no visible bones within, only discolored flesh and thick, dark blood. I shot out of bed screaming at the top of my lungs. It was morning again. I felt as if I had been hit by a truck. My body ached all over and the headache and nausea were back, only much more intense. I looked down at my chest, my pajama pants, and my bed. There wasn't a drop of blood anywhere to be found. The mirror was once again covered, just as I had left it the night before. "That's it. I'm calling Dr. Cutts," I exclaimed to myself and went for my phone. However, as soon as I picked it up, I was interrupted by a knock at my front door. I sighed in agitation before throwing on a t-shirt and heading down the hall. I undid the locks and swung open the door, only to find none other than Dave standing in the hallway. "Hey man, I heard you screaming. Is everything alright?" he asked. Yeah, Dave, I'm alright, I think. Just a bad dream is all," I answered. "Oh, okay." He pushed his glasses up. I thought I heard someone choking last night. Did that come from your apartment? How I stopped myself. "I don't believe so. That probably would have woken me up. I slept pretty hard." We then both looked toward the stairwell upon hearing footsteps and watched Beth come around the corner. Dave lowered his brow and smiled, pushing up his thick glasses once more. Well, hey there, Beth," he called to her. "Good morning." Beth rolled her eyes.
Hi, Dave.
Dave looked at the floor nervously.
Well, I'll get going. I'll leave y'all to it. Well, later, Carlos. See ya, Beth.
"See ya, Dave. Thanks for checking on me."
Why do you even talk to him?
Beth asked me, grimacing as I shut the door behind us. "I don't know, because he's nice to me, I guess. The same reason I talk to you," I replied, showing her a half smile. She stared at me for a moment, her face showing just how unamused she was.
He gives me the creeps. I don't like the way he looks at me.
He gives me the willies too, but I think he's harmless, Beth. He doesn't mean anything by it.
Well, I'd watch him if I were you.
Got it. Anyway, what brings you over here? I asked her as she made her way over to the couch, flopping herself down across the green cushions.
Just wanted to see how you were is all.
She answered, putting her arms behind her head.
Did you not get my message?
I haven't had a chance to look at my phone yet. Sorry, I feel like crap. Maybe I'm coming down with something. I've also been having nightmares. Beth shot up into a sitting position, her face painted with concern.
Is it because of the mirror?
I think it could be a factor, but it isn't going anywhere. Trust me, a promise is a promise.
Well, if you say so, I just want the best for you.
Thanks, yeah, I'll be fine. I think I'm going to call into work today and try to go see Dr. Cutts. I also have the weekend off, so maybe that will help.
Yeah, maybe. Alright. I'm off then. Let me know how it goes.
Will do. I replied, then she came up to me for a hug.
You're the best, Carlos, and soon you'll be better than ever.
She said, then opened the door and left. I then called my job, made my appointment, got ready, and headed out the door as fast as I could without doing anything else. My meeting with Dr. Cutts went pretty much exactly as expected, except for a few angry outbursts from me, which at this point was completely out of character. She said that the mirror may be causing me to regress, that it may be affecting my mood, and in turn causing my overall physiological health to decline, and that my dreams sounded like sleep paralysis. She said that I should find other arrangements for it, and to up my medication a little until I began to feel that I was at baseline again. Once I refused to get rid of it, Dr. Kutz recommended that I try sleeping on the couch to see if it would affect my dreams, and that I should also look in the kitchen drawer for my knife to reassure myself that it was only a nightmare and to put my mind at ease. I decided to follow Dr. Kutz's advice and tried to make myself a comfortable place to sleep on the couch. I was watching my favorite comfort show and my eyes were getting heavy when I realized that I hadn't yet washed my face or brushed my teeth. I dreaded the thought of having to look into the bathroom mirror, but was comforted by the fact the mirror was too small for a full-bodied adult to fit through, as my reflection had done in my dreams the last 2 nights. Still, I had absolutely zero desire to look into it, but I did have an idea. I got up and made my way down the hall, walking past my bedroom door, which was now tightly shut. I stopped just outside the bathroom, reached in to flip the light switch, and opened the medicine cabinet so that I wouldn't have to look into the mirror. I grabbed a rag off the rack by the shower so that I could wash my face, and then proceeded to brush my teeth, groggy and half asleep. After finishing, I cleaned my brush, returned it to the cabinet, and used the rag to wipe my mouth. Before I even realized what I was doing, I found myself shutting the cabinet out of habit, bringing myself face to face with the bathroom mirror. There was the cold, emotionless smile. My reflection still had the cut across its neck and the holes in its chest, but there was no blood anywhere. I tried to step back, but my body had frozen. My initial thought was, "Ha! Good luck getting through there." How wrong I was. I then noticed that its entire left arm was missing, as well as a large chunk of its left side. It raised its right hand and pushed it through the glass, grabbed onto the other side of the sink, and began to drag itself through. As more of its body passed through and brought the lower half into view, I noticed that more of it was missing than I had initially realized. Nearly all of its entire left side from the neck over, including its left leg, were missing, as well as its right foot and ankle. It continued to pull itself through until it was far enough to tumble out. It smacked off of the corner of the sink and landed off to the side, between the sink and the toilet. I then noticed that something was protruding from the flesh on its hip on the right side. It was the knife that it had taken and used the night before, and I then realized that I had completely forgotten to look in the drawer for it. It then waved its boneless, tentacle-like right arm around until it connected with my leg and proceeded to pull itself upward from the floor, wrapping the remainder of its leg around my own to hold itself steady as it climbed. Even without all of the parts that were missing, it was still so incredibly heavy. I wasn't able to move or adjust myself to attempt to keep my balance, but I somehow managed to avoid falling over. Once it finally had a hold on the back of my shoulder, it proceeded to pull and use the remainder of its right leg to strike at the back of my knee, successfully sending me sideways toward the tub. I fell into the shower curtain, subsequently pulling it down with us. The imposter then rolled me onto my back, grabbed the side of the tub and repositioned and balanced itself until it was sitting on top of me with the remainder of its right leg placed near my head. I watched in disgust as the gash in its neck slowly opened and closed, manipulated by the air being forced in and out accordingly with each movement that it made, a mockery of the breath of life. The smile widened as it looked at my expression. It brought its hand down from the side of the tub to the knife handle protruding from its hip. Tears began to pool in my eyes, then rolled down my temples. I watched it remove the blade from its flesh, bringing it upward to my face. I observed that there wasn't a spot of blood anywhere on it. The blade was completely clean. It then pressed the back of the blade into the corners of my mouth and used the flat side to pry my jaw open. The once identical mirror image doppelganger then removed the knife from my mouth, leaving my jaw agape, and began carving thin cuts off of the remainder of its leg, like a butcher using a meat slicer. However, unlike the previous night in which it had mutilated itself and bled all over me, no blood escaped its wounds whatsoever, as if its body was now completely devoid of it. There was still no bones to be found, only the same gut-wrenching discolored flesh throughout. It continued cutting until it reached its hip and then began working on its head, starting at the top left side. It sliced off pieces until it reached its nose and then began sawing at its torso, all the while still staring at me, albeit with only half of a head to smile with at this point. Suddenly, it stopped moving altogether, holding still for a few moments before dropping the knife. The remainder of its head fell backward, widening the gaping wound in its neck, and it began to sway from side to side as it had done the previous night. What was left of its mouth then began to move as if it were trying to form words. It became still once again for a few moments before bringing its head forward to train its remaining eye on me once again, the half-smile reappearing on its face. The right hand began to rummage through the piles of mutilated flesh laying beside my head and on top of my abdomen until it seemingly found a chunk that it found preferable. It raised it high above its head and paused for a moment, then swiftly slammed it downward toward my face. I awoke on the couch, immediately jumped to my feet, and began looking around frantically. The headaches and nausea were back, and they were worse than ever. The pain was so intense that I could barely see straight. I looked down at my clothes. They were still as clean as they were last night when I put them on. I made my way to the bathroom to make sure that I had been dreaming again. Although I struggled to do so, before entering, I reached out to the mirror from the side and swung it open. I stepped into the bathroom and immediately looked into the tub. It was spotless, and the shower curtain was still hanging up. I felt a wave of anger and rage begin to take over my body like I had never felt before. I was mad about these dreams, enraging that nothing seemed to stop them, and angry that Beth had even asked me to keep her mirror in the first place, starting all of this. I made my way to the kitchen, drew a glass of water from the tap, and choked down some medicine for the sickness, along with the recommended increased dose of my daily medicine. I hovered over the sink, breathing deeply, fighting against the pain, the nausea, and the anger until I finally started to calm down. I glanced over to my left a little, and my gaze landed upon the drawer where I kept my knives. There's no way. There's just no way. These are dreams. It's there. It has to be. I reassured myself under my breath, then slowly made my way over to it and placed my hand on the chipped handle. I stood there for a moment, fully weighing the possibilities and implications of what I may or may not see. Then why can't I look? My heart began to pound. My fingers drummed upon the handle. Come on, Carlos, open it. Do it. I closed my eyes and pulled the drawer slowly. I stood there with my eyes closed for a few moments before finally forcing myself to look. It was gone. I couldn't believe my eyes, and I began to hyperventilate. The damn knife was gone, which meant that that thing had it. That these weren't dreams at all. At the same time, I also felt a strange sense of relief wash over me knowing that I wasn't being manipulated by my fears, that for once in my life, my phobia was justified. All things considered, I still didn't understand how the mirror was uncovered the night before last, though the sound of my door closing was a potential hint. I also didn't know I woke up on the couch this morning, considering that being in a bathroom was the last thing I remembered. But I didn't care. I needed to get the hell away from here, and any and all mirrors. Without mirrors, there was no way for this thing to get to me. I picked up my phone and began calling around at different hotels, but none of them were willing to accommodate my need of removing any and all mirrors from the room. Or they told me they had mirrors in the lobby and/or hallways, so I did a web search for cabins to rent in the area. I called the number on a few listings until I was able to find someone that agreed to remove the one and only mirror in their cabin. Even though it had only a wood-burning stove, a table and chair, and a single bed, my response was, "Sounds perfect." The antique mirror in my room was still covered, so I managed to grab some clothes and an extra pair of shoes, which I shoved haphazardly into my duffel bag. I grabbed my essentials from the bathroom cabinet and my medicine from the kitchen before grabbing my phone and ordering a ride. I also texted Beth to let her know that I was going away for a few days and that I most likely wouldn't have service, though I didn't spare many details. Dave stopped me on my way out the door. "Hey, Carlos, so how long have you and Beth been faithful, if you don't mind me asking?" I felt anger swell up in me out of nowhere. "What are you getting at, huh, Dave?" I responded, gritting my teeth. "Hey now, bud, take her easy. I didn't mean to offend. I just happened to have seen her leave in your apartment just before dawn the last few days. That's all." "Beth? She what?" No. My anger turned into disbelief. Just wanted to say congrats, but he's a beaut. Must be a lot of fun, too. You ain't been getting much sleep telling from the bags under your eyes, he said, smiling and pushing his glasses back into place. I gotta go, Dave, I replied, taking off and rushing down the stairs before he even got a chance to respond. My body felt fevered as the anger came rushing back. Beth, no, I said through my teeth. My driver arrived promptly after I stepped outside, and the ride out to the cabin took about an hour and a half. Beth attempted to text me during the trip until I lost service, but I didn't respond to any of her messages, and each one I received made me even angrier about the situation. I met the owner outside. He was an older man with glasses, perhaps in his mid-60s, with a short, thick, gray goatee, and wore a woodland camouflage hat with shaggy gray hair poking out from underneath. Hey there, young fella. Name's Paul. How's the trip? He asked. Oh, not bad at all. I enjoyed the scenery, I replied. Yep, it's beautiful out here. Nice and quiet, too, he said, taking a brass key out of his pocket and handing it to me. This here's the only key you'll need. I left you a jug of water inside. I'll be back in the morning with more supplies for you. I know you don't have a vehicle, so I can take you down to the showers in the morning if you'd like. Thank you very much. You have no idea how much I appreciate and needed this. Are you sure you want to cut the rate in half? Don't mention it. And yep, once you explained your situation to me, I felt in my heart I should help. We all have our demons to deal with. Hell, not like it was much to begin with, anyway. I had only told him about my phobia and my desire to get out of my apartment. You're very kind, Paul. Thank you again. It'll be nice to get away from the city and any and all mirrors for a while. Now, wanting to get away from the city, I can understand, the man said, laughing a bit from deep within his belly. No, I'm kidding you. Enjoy yourself, young man. God bless. I watched him climb into his old pickup truck and drive away before entering the cabin. It was quaint. The man wasn't kidding when he said it was bare bones, but it was more than enough for me. I spent the rest of the day sitting on the porch and staring off into the lush evergreens, thinking about everything that had happened over the last few days until evening began giving way to night. The temperature started to rapidly drop, so I decided to go inside and build myself a fire in the stove before getting into bed. It wasn't long before the quiet serenity, along with the warmth of the fire, carried me off soundly to sleep. I awoke to the sound of the cabin door creaking open and closed. I didn't manage to open my eyes in time to see the person coming in, but I caught their silhouette passing in front of the now smoldering embers. Who's there? That you, Paul?
Nope.
A voice called out to me in the dark. Beth? I shouted, springing upright in bed. I recognized her voice, but there was something off about it. It sounded ominous and had a slight reverberation, almost as if it were layered.
Not exactly,
She replied. What? I started to say, feeling the anger begin to rise within me again, and started to speak. You bit, but I was cut off. She stood before me in an instant, staring into my eyes. My body froze.
Play nice now.
I was locked in place sitting on the bed, the same as if I were looking into my reflection's eyes. She began to laugh, then made her way over to the stove and started to rebuild the fire. I wanted to scream, tell her exactly how I felt about everything that had been happening, whether she would care or not. But just like every occurrence in the nights prior, I couldn't speak a word. She stirred the fire a little before making her way over to me, now illuminated by the orange glow of the flames. I could see that her once beautiful face bore the same cold smile, the same lifeless eyes as my doppelganger, and that she had a messenger bag over her shoulder.
I'm not the Beth you once knew. I'm something more, and have been for quite some time.
She smiled wide.
This body is ours, and when the process is finished, once we're completely inside, you'll belong to us as well.
Inside? I thought to myself.
I hope that you've been enjoying your midnight snacks.
The memories of the vomit filling my orifices, the blood that crept towards my mouth, and the flesh that my doppelganger carved like a ham and slammed downward came rushing to the forefront of my mind. I began to chuckle.
That's right. You've got quite the appetite.
It seemed that Beth, and likely my mimic by extension, could somehow hear my thoughts. All of the fear, anger, and repugnance swirled in the pit of my stomach like a hurricane with nowhere to go. The urge to expel what little contents my stomach held was overwhelming. Beth's expression was distinctly overjoyed, as if she could feel it. She just sat and stared at me for what felt like hours, basking in my suffering until she finally spoke.
Time to end it, Carlos.
She then pushed me backward onto the bed and crawled up onto me. I tried to resist, to refuse, but it was all in vain. Beth pulled my mouth open with one hand, then reached back into her messenger bag with the other, retrieving a small, square mirror. She held it above my face, forcing me to look into it. The reflection showed what looked like a long, thick strip of human flesh with an eyeball nestled within what was presumably a socket. All that remained of my doppelganger, laying where my head should be. It was coiled, looking outward like a snake that was ready to strike. I watched as it leaped toward the mirror, colliding with the other side of the glass with a dull thud. It then fell through it, straight into my open mouth, and slithered down my throat.